Jen, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks. This is our second podcast after the original one with Alex, where we just discussed the real estate AI. So I just wanted to chat with you personally as well, just to, I guess, discuss the latest updates on the Chat GPT 4o. But also, like, I wanted to chat a little bit about you and about the little thing that we're kind of like the project that we're into right now. So, yeah, Jen, just why don't you tell us a little bit yourself about yourself? I'll start with just preface saying that we've met like I think exactly a year ago or like maybe 11 months ago or something like that, randomly. But since then we were just like always in touch and all of that. So, yeah, why don't you kind of like tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. My original motivation in life and background started in biology. So I studied evolutionary biology and then ended up doing a PhD in neuroscience. And my motivation for doing this was because I was really fascinated about how we do research and how we try and uh, understand very difficult problems and get closer to solutions. And in evolutionary biology, you're always doing this kind of understanding past environments, past patterns, and its implications aren't as obvious in the real world. Like you're not necessarily helping people in the same way, at least what I was doing. And so I ended up pivoting to more relevant, in my mind, at least based on my motivations, a more relevant field. So that was neuroscience because I wanted to work on problems that impact people on a daily basis. So I was particularly interested in chronic pain and the medical sciences. But I also realized that technology plays a huge role, particularly machine learning, in how we understand and get closer to understanding these really nuanced interactions in our body. And it made me realize that we have to start looking at data differently so it can be prepared for machine learning. So I moved into tech after my PhD. And so I've been in AI, I've been in Web3, and I've really enjoyed learning all these different pieces of the tech world. It's so nuanced, just like biology. And there's actually the pace of innovation is just extraordinary. So that is how I met Samir, which is
Yeah.
it was amazing serendipity. Yeah.
Yeah, I just had a party at my house, and you were one of the guests as well, and yeah, we kind of kicked it off, and I think ever since then we started talking, and at some point I kind of like brought to you my idea about the developing world of AI and how I feel like people are not really like professionals are not really ready for that right now. There's a lot of hype on Twitter and the tech space about that. There's always like people testing it, but I feel like it's sort of like a bubble of tech enthusiasts. And they all say on paper that the end user is always the professional or maybe the business who wants to optimize its performance and just maybe optimize the cost or just productivity in general. But you don't see a lot of use cases, from the street. You don't see any like mom and pop shops or medium-sized businesses. And I feel like that's what I wanted to kind of like tackle and make sure like, a lot of people are not afraid of AI. Because what I see is there's a lot of intimidation where people just don't want to use it. They're afraid of it. The professionals, they're just trying to be like in denial. But I feel like that's a huge mistake. And people shouldn't be afraid of it, but instead they should embrace it to be more competitive. It's not going to replace you. It will make you better. It will make you 100 times better and more competitive. And so that was kind of like my pitch to you, of like where I stand. And yeah, we started working on this together.
Yeah.
Another
It's
thing
and
that's yeah,
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
No, I was just
No,
gonna
no.
say to your point, like the stickiness of technology has a lot to do with how people can get it to do make noticeable improvements in their lives, right? And that's the one, AI and automation are still very much like in early days, right? And we actually need a lot of automation to make AI much more impactful. And I think that's really one of the next steps is getting automation to a point and getting people to start automating their workflows with these new algos that are now available to anyone on the street.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's like a lot to be done there, and there's very little focus on that. Like I went to an AI Google, like, what is that, accelerator, or just like a presentation or like little conference. And what I've seen right now is a lot of chat about the tech and very little chat about the end user. But however, I did notice the anxiety about the fact that the adoption rates are not as high. The whole Chat GPT thing has plateaued. They showed the charts where, the interest is slowly decreasing now. Like, it was like a huge hype, and then it's kind of plateaued, like the visits to Chat GPT. But before that, before we go diving into AI, I also want to bring out the fact that both of us are coming from the sports background. On my end, I'm
Yes.
more of like on the business side, on the marketing side, but you have like a hands-on experience playing hockey. How did that come about? Like, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I started playing hockey when I was, I think, 6 or 7 years old. I was in first grade, and it actually came about through my inability to skate in figure skates. And, Samir, when we were growing up, I'm admittedly a few years older than you, but girls were encouraged pretty strongly to go into figure skating instead of ice hockey. But fortunately, I had a younger brother who was playing ice hockey even before me. And so I begged my parents to let me play. And that was because I hated figure skates. They were uncomfortable. I couldn't skate in them. And so my father was thrilled, and I started playing ice hockey. And then it became more of a passion and like more of a competitive thing. And I ended up playing in college at Harvard, which was, an awesome experience. It's
Yeah, what's
very
like
different.
what
Yeah.
it's like to play for a Harvard hockey team? Like, I mean, because I feel like it's more competitive at that level, and just because of its school itself. Like, was that a lot of pressure?
Yeah, it was a lot of pressure. And when I joined as a freshman, the team was pretty large. I think there were like 26 players on the team, which is, a very large team. You can only travel, I think, with 21 or 22 players. So there was a lot of pressure there. And at that point in, I guess it was 2006, Harvard was a highly ranked team. There were lots of fantastic players that went on to actually have unbelievable national, international experience and are now, head coaches all over North America. But yeah, it was a lot of pressure. You learn, yeah, you're it's this constant learning thing, and this is actually very akin to AI. Like you get thrown into a new environment, and you're constantly like updating and innovating to try and get to a point where you get a playing spot, because nothing is handed to you in those environments. And that's when you really start to learn about yourself and your resilience, because it isn't easy most of the time, but it was really fun. You learn how to perform under pressure ultimately.
Yeah, and I mean, you're still kind of coaching and you're still consulting, and just like with yours, because your field was science, but at the same time you were, college athletes, and I was always amazed how you can juggle the two, especially at such a high level, especially with like majors like that. How did you time manage? How did you stress manage with that, on like with all that being at the same time, at you?
Yeah. It's and now it's not like it's, different details, same dynamics, coaching and like, business tech. It's all, teams, how do teams function? Back then, it was a competition of calendars, right? And so, especially for lab time, I think lab time was always in the evening, and or in the late afternoon. And we would practice, I think, in the evening or late afternoon. And so you had to accommodate for that and accommodate for travel schedules, right? But nowadays, it's easier with a more interconnected world. And the type of stuff I do, I can, there's no real competition to be, at a rink versus, in the classroom. But I think that was one of the hardest bits. But yeah, you didn't have, now I'm remembering, it was so long ago, you didn't have a ton of time to like not do what you were supposed to be doing. Like you were doing your schoolwork, or you were training, or you were eating, or you were sleeping. I think those are the four priorities for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, I would never, I don't think I could ever do that. Like, I'm the type of person who focuses on just one thing, and it's just like so hard to switch, especially from, I guess it's actually complementing each other, the physical tough sport versus like, the coursework, the academic work and all of that. But I feel like your academic work is really useful for, what we do with AI. I feel like, I always love hearing your perspective and your opinion when it comes to different AI tools that I discover, and we just like start like diving into that. And with that said, with the latest ChatGPT 4o update, I really was curious, like, what do you think about that? Because, we've been diving into ChatGPT lately a lot, starting with 3.5 and then with 4, and then now it's 4o. Um, so I've been sending you some links and lectures and vice versa as well. Um, I've been researching that a lot, of like what has changed. Obviously, OpenAI had a conference, I think around 10 days ago, where they did a presentation. So I just wanted to ask your opinion on that. What did you think about ChatGPT 4o? Is it a massive kind of upgrade from GPT-4, or is just some sort of like a marketing like next flagship model, but not really?
Um, I think, well, the first thing I'd like to point out, which surprised me, I think we were all surprised by ChatGPT 4o coming out, because it had been a bit quiet on OpenAI's side and what was coming out next. And there was a lot of competition surfacing, like Claude 3 at Anthropic. Um, I think it is in a lot of ways quite an impressive upgrade in many respects. Number one, it's free. And it does appear to offer more up-to-date information from Chat GPT-4, which is paid product. And I don't know, are they going to keep Chat GPT 4.0 free?
So what happens is they keep it free, but it's a limited use. So like you only can have like a certain amount of questions or prompts or something like that. So
Okay.
yeah, the paid version gives you more, you can do more volume of work, I guess, with it in a certain
Okay.
period of time.
Sorry, that was slightly off topic, but it's an interesting, I'm just from a business perspective, it's interesting that they introduced this. It offers, I think, a way more opportunity to play and create more content, audit more content. I think that there's just a lot of potential when people, and it really comes from, I think, back to the point earlier about how does any particular small business or user leverage this technology. You have to figure out what kind of media are you using, and are there things you're doing manually that you can just get this thing to do. And I say this in the context of, are these types of media that you're willing to hand over to OpenAI onto their servers, right? Because I think one of the with more power, I think comes more
Mhm.
privacy problems. If you're filming yourself, and this is not an option, I don't think this feature is available yet for the new for 4o, but you can, film yourself and it can, interact with you. You can, I think, currently upload video that it provides text output for, but
There was definitely like an example where you show the room and everything, and it tells you what it sees, and it can like tells you opinions and all of that, and the latency was so low, and like yeah, it was definitely like it was looking great. It's not out yet, but they said they're gonna like update that version so that there's a video in a couple weeks.
And I think that interaction piece is interesting. Like when you think about what this is useful for, and the first thing I thought about was interviews, like salary negotiations or like interviews for jobs. You can have someone to work with constantly that's pulling the latest information from the web and have those interactions and prepare yourself in a verbal way. I think that's like a really interesting use case for this, because I think there's a lot of advantage in the interview process for people who are more naturally inclined to that environment versus those who aren't. And I think if you can leverage technology like this to make yourself more comfortable, it pays dividends. But I think, yeah, it's what's amazing about this release is that all of a sudden it's multimodal. You can input a bunch of different types of like media. It's not just text, and you can output, and it will output whatever you want. Um, and so it is, it's taken really Dolly and ChatGPT 4 and, improved the product. Plus, it added a bunch of other features, which we're going to get to play with hopefully in a few weeks' time. Who knows, though? I don't know when their planned release is.
Yeah, so hopefully they will release them as soon as possible. One thing I've noticed though, when they did their presentation, they did plug in a cable to their phone, and they said like, "Oh, the reason we were plugging in this cable to this phone is because we need like a faster internet." So that kind
Mm.
of like gave me a little pause and like, okay, so you're just admitting that, the version that you're trying to show right now is very dependent on the internet, and most of us are just using, the typical Wi-Fi. And I wonder, like, because there is a lot of compute going on for, ChatGPT to chat with you like it is a real person in real time with zero delay. So I wonder how they're gonna solve this problem, or whether that's a solvable problem at all, or is this just something like we're just gonna wait until we have a faster internet? And I think what I like about the whole video interaction and just like the voice interaction, that is literally just like no delay. As you said, there's a preparation for interviews, but also I feel like for clients as well, right? The way you talk to clients, the way you train your employees on how to speak with clients, and be prepared for different scenarios, right? So you can basically tell the AI, hey, here's the following scenario. I want you to be the disappointed client who has a problem that we need to solve, and the client is in distress. So please play this out, and you can add more details to that. And then you put your trainee, right, the employee in training, and you just kind of like observe them. And at the same time, the ChatGPT will talk to you, but also film you as well, and then give you the feedback. It will give you the notes, and on the way you've acted, and the way your face was the mimic, because it was also kind of like, oh, tell me how my face looks, happy, not happy. That was one of the videos on ChatGPT. And it's that little clip didn't get a lot of views, but I feel like ultimately it's one of the most important parts, because especially for sales and retail or anything like that, presentations, like it can give you notes on, like, how you performed, especially if it's like a stressful situation with the client. So I'm just trying to provide, our listeners a little bit of a context of, like, it's not just you prompting or just doing something where you just need information right away, but you can really interact with it in real time and use it for training. Um, what do you think about it?
I think that's spot on. And it really, harkens back to our original conversation when Alex was on the podcast about, interacting with this technology in a different way. And, we talk about that in the course as well for, Chat GPT for real estate agents. But it's, now they're really pushing this, and they're forcing people to get to the point where, like, hey, you're going to have a conversation with this AI in a way that you have never had a conversation before. And to your point, training is huge. And if we want to really drill down to, and I say this, coming from, medical sciences, how we interact with patients, in a variety of respects. Patients often are not heard in the right way, and feel like the medical system doesn't necessarily take what they're saying into consideration. But when we talk about research, how we ask questions is really important in terms of the data that we get back, which we ultimately feed into the algorithm. So could you use, obviously, like when you're training people to conduct research, can you start training them on how to be a better question asker and how to interact with subjects better? And I say this in the context of just like the training bit, not the actual interaction bit, because that's like obviously a different level, and you can't have recordings of that necessarily. But then that pipeline that informs, that like changes the data that goes in ultimately into some machine learning algo later on. So there's all these phases that these algos can impact, and you can easily have like Chat GPT-4o, specifically have like a module for your sales team, and like
Absolutely.
identifying smiles, and like that kind of thing. And this is, I think, where uncanny valley starts to hit, when you see it's like these avatars or these images that they kind of look similar, but they don't have this, they're missing some of the emotive piece, or their facial structure is a little bit different. Humans are very good at identifying that. So I'm curious to see how good it is at identifying, the smile thing. I guess smiles are easy to identify, maybe against a grimace, not so much, but that'll be
The
fun to
tone of
play with as
voice, the
well.
tone of voice is it
Yes.
also identifies that, and that's, I think, also very important. It reminds me of me watching the reality show. I think it was Selling OC, where this real estate agent, she was new, and her, senior, I guess, colleague basically was out of town, and he's like, "Hey, can you handle this property showing?" And she had so many questions thrown into her at that open house, and she didn't know how to reply to that. And I feel like for real estate agents, that would be a great tool to say like, hey, pretend that you are a potential house buyer, property buyer, and start asking questions. And you would be a real estate agent on the other side of it, of those questions, and you would be basically providing your responses. That's another thing. And just to give you like an anecdote, over the weekend, when this whole thing, dropped last week, I was like, okay, let me research on that. And I kind of went all in. I'm like, you know what? Since we're getting so fast and so quickly into this, geometric progression with the Chat GPT and how it's better and better now, I'm just gonna upload myself into it. I just basically downloaded my entire, my professional persona, right? I downloaded my entire LinkedIn profile. I've uploaded several versions of my resumes. I've uploaded everything into ChatGPT. Like I asked it to act as like a career coach or like a motivational coach or something like Tony Robbins type, right? Like I'm like literally said, pretend you're a Tony Robbins. But in reality, I said, who are the best like life coaches or whatever? And I had like a list of 10 and I don't know any of them, but I just copied all of them and I said, pretend that you're like a mix of all of those 10 life coaches. And I think I was creating a plugin or something like that. And so basically it saved it in the memory and then I uploaded all of my information. I said, ask me the questions that you need to know about me so that you can better help me with my life, with my plans and all of that. So it provided a bunch of questions. It basically asked, what are your goals? What do you think you need to improvement on? No, blah, 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 blah. So I was trying to be as honest as possible. I've uploaded all of those responses and I decided to check, test, what it is. And so I basically every morning I can wake up and I talk to it instead of typing just because I really want to push that talking bit. And so yeah, I would just wake up in the morning. I was like, hey, let's do a weekly check-in, like, and it will start talking to me like, okay, what are your plans? What are the list of things you need to do? What do you think you need improvement on? And then I was like, hey, can you like give me a motivation boost? Like I feel down about myself. Can you like remind me of all of my achievements and all of that? And so it already memorized that in the past, so it already know what to tell me, like in terms of like what I want to hear, and it will like prop me up, like, hey, Samir, you did this and that, and like you will do great in the future. So like, and meanwhile, I'm just brushing my teeth and I'm listening to it. I'm like, okay, well, let's dive into that thing or this thing. Let's talk about that thing when I did and my plans in the future. And so we will develop that in a very polite voice, in a very polite tone. And I really enjoyed that. I felt like it still had a little bit of a artificial component to it, but it definitely felt like I'm talking to a real person. Like my brain started like to be affected by it. It's like that movie, Her.
Yeah.
So I
No,
recommend
it's
everyone to try it. I don't like advise it, like do 100%, don't give it all of your information, but just whatever you wanted to know, play around with it.
yeah, don't give it all of your information. No, I mean, honestly, that's a great way to start your day. I think that's one of you people, in the busyness of life, like you have your own personal motivational coach that's personalized, like it is personal to you, not just in you, but based on your information where you are. I might do that.
Yeah, for example, an office can have internal documentation, right, for every employee or just like HR docs or anything like that. And you can definitely create a plugin for that or just upload it into ChatGPT as like a usual safe chat. But plugins are better. I feel like plugins are more um, like convenient for that. And just for work purposes, you can chat with it as well. Now that it has the knowledge, the entire knowledge of your like internal documentation, you can ask it questions as well. Like, hey, do you think I can do this based on the policies or whatever? And it can give you the responses. I feel like that's something that can be helpful.
Absolutely.
We've also, kind of talked about it extensively going back to the real estate thing. Um, we created a class for people who would like to learn more about ChatGPT or just AI in general, but simply are afraid to start because it seems like things are moving so fast right now. Um, and so we wanted to make sure that it's a guide for beginners. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and it really comes back to, I think all of us share this, like technology is useful, but really it's the application and people's understanding that's the most useful. Like if people don't adopt the amazing things you've created, then it may be amazing, but it's not necessarily moving the needle. So the course, for me is really important from the standpoint of it's anyone can pick it up and go. And you don't even have to be a real estate agent to take the course. Like What we're trying to do is say, hey, there's all this technology, and Chat GPT is one of them. Um, Here's how you use it in your day to day. And this is like just picking it up and using it. This is not even automation level integration into your workflow. So and we're going to add more content in the coming weeks where we start to show the diversity of the LLMs and how you can leverage them in addition to other types of generative AI algos that you can play with and add to your workflow. But ultimately, we want people to hop in, be able to navigate the lectures that matter to them. So it's clear. It's like, actually, I want to learn this today, like how to integrate ChatGPT with my social media, and then just like have a springboard to start working off of. Because I think that a lot of people don't realize that when this technology comes out, we're all doing that. We're all playing with it. We're all trying to figure out, hey, how does this work for us? Like we're all learning. Unless you're building the algos yourself, like you're not necessarily going to have a strong inclination to just knowing how it's going to be implemented and effective in your day to day or your week to week, however you want to use it. So I think maybe the point I am trying to make at the end of this is don't be shy and don't be embarrassed that you don't know how to use it. This it's learning for all of us. When ChatGPT came out, I was learning with everyone else. It's a very interesting and exciting and new space, but it's we're all learning. And when 4o came out, I was like not prepared. I was like, whoa, it was like a stealth launch, although it wasn't a stealth launch, but it did. I didn't hear of anything.
It did come out unexpectedly. Like they didn't announce it beforehand. So like
Yeah,
it was
it
like
sounded like
dropped in.
they pulled kind of an Apple where they would they announced it at their conference.
They tried to do it before Google conference, is what they're saying, because Google had the same thing.
Okay.
Like 3 days later, Google had their own thing. But anyways, it's like an arms race right now with all these AI tools.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, Anthropic released Claude 3, I think, not too much earlier than like OpenAI's release. So, there's all these things coming out. So we, as people who enjoy this tech, try to understand it and communicate its value, are always learning as well. And, in our learning, we distill it down so that folks can hop in faster than perhaps, we necessarily did at the very beginning. Now we can adopt it a lot faster, but it's just from experimentation and getting in there and learning what it can and cannot do. And sometimes you just have to ask it, what can you do and what can't you do? Because now there's so many releases of everything that I get confused as to whether it can accept X media or put out X content or types of media. So that is always learning.
I think ultimately what we're trying to also help our customers with and our students with is the fact that you can close more deals with AI. You can be more productive. You can increase your revenue. You can increase your sales by basically arming your employees with AI tools. You can improve your business because now the productivity will be, 2x, 3x, 5x. And, you know, this this is really helping you with making as many deals as possible, closing them as fast as possible, increasing your sales volume. That's the real potential there because it's not just a toy, it's a tool for you. Like for example, you're using Microsoft Word or Google Cloud, Google Docs or anything like that. That's exactly the same thing that will help you with your processes. And that's ultimately what we're trying to tell our students and make sure that they understand that it's not just an entertaining little tricky thing that you can just play around with. This is something that will improve your life and put money in your bank.
For sure. And I think you can even parse it into two separate processes or like ways of thinking about how technology can impact a workflow. One, there is your current workflow, and can you reduce the amount of active time that you have to spend doing it? So, time is money, as they always say. So if something takes you an hour and you can reduce it to say like even 30 minutes, and you're a real estate agent, that's really important because that 30 minutes could be used for lead generation in some other way. But you're taking your current workflow and compressing the time with technology. And the trick is understanding your workflow and understanding how the technology fits in. And you're always iterating through that. The first time you do it, you're never going to get enough value out of it. You'll be able to reduce it more. And then the second thing is, how do you improve your workflow? In particular, how are you, for real estate agents, going to improve how you get leads and close those sales, right? And that's like kind of more of the innovation piece. You know, you've made your workflow more efficient. Now, are you getting more customers? How can you use technology to get more customers? And maybe use the time that you're saving, because you're not spending so much time writing a bunch of descriptions for 10 platforms. You're now just using that time to figure out, like, hey, lead generation needs an improvement. What's the best path forward? So in my mind, if you start like parsing down the advantages here, there's like efficiency and innovation. Yeah, there's huge wins. You just have to be very, very intentional about how you're implementing it.
Dr. Jen Brawn, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for participating in this little conversation. I hope this is not the last, and I'm sure it's not the last one that we will publish. I want it to be more cyclical, but I appreciate the fact that you kind of allowed us to dive into this more from the science perspective and from the professional perspective as well. So I will leave all the information under this episode on how to reach out to us and how to reach out to you. And I hope that our listeners will also check out our class um, on real estate, Chat GPT use as well on udemy.com. Jen, thanks so much.
Thank you.